Hey guys, in this video I want to talk about what is it like to memorize a massive memory project. When I set the record for the fastest to memorize a deck of cards in the United States, I picked up the cards, I looked through them in 1 minute and 27 seconds, and then I reassembled a second deck to match that deck. That's all done really fast, and that's speed memory. There's a different type though. There's these huge memory projects. What's it like to do one of those? What about the project where I memorized 7,000 words in sequence? There's 2,400 members of the United States military who died in the war in Afghanistan. I memorized all 2,400, their rank, their first name, and their last name. It's 7,000 words. It takes me 11 hours to write out all those words from memory. I've memorized the United States Constitution, 4,543 words. It takes me 6 hours to write out that from memory. But what's the thought process? What is it like when I'm in the middle of these massive memory projects? What's going on in my mind? What's my attitude? And what is the experience itself like? Number one, nothing else can matter. Nothing else can matter. When you're in the middle of a massive memory project like this, it has to be your priority. In 2012, when I started memorizing all the soldiers who died in the war in Afghanistan, there's 2,400 of them. Everywhere I went, you would see me with this black binder. You would see me with this binder at baseball games, whether they were in Texas or when I was on a business trip in Boston and I went to a Red Sox game. I had the binder during the baseball game. When I went on a business trip to Africa, I took that binder with me and I studied it when I was in Africa. I studied it when I was on an airplane, when I was on a train, everywhere I went in 2012. If you saw me, I had the binder in my hand. I live in downtown Fort Worth, and when I'd walk around downtown Fort Worth, people would say, "Hey Ron, what are you doing?" And I just hold up the binder. It went with me everywhere. It was attached to me. And that's how your mindset has to be when you're in the middle of one of these massive memory projects. It has to become your priority. Next, and here, this one's actually such an important point here. When you're in the middle of a memory project like this, and when you see the end result, when you see me at the Afghanistan wall writing it out, or the Constitution writing it out, people will often say, "Wow, this is a tremendous display of memory. What an incredible display of memory." And I'll say to them, "Yeah, you're kind of right. It is kind of a display of memory, but it's not really the biggest thing that it's a display of. It's more a display of discipline." You see, everybody can learn a memory system and memorize 7,000 words. Pretty much anybody could do it. But most people wouldn't do it because of the discipline that it requires. I remember when in 2012, I taught a 6-year-old girl how to memorize the presidents of the United States. And there was 44 presidents at the time. She was 6 years old, and she could say them forwards, and she could say them backwards. And I was so impressed with her because of how young she was, and she got all 44 presidents. So fast forward, when I started memorizing the 2,400 people that died in the war in Afghanistan from the United States, every time I got discouraged, every time I wanted to quit, and believe me, I wanted to quit often. Every time I wanted to quit, I thought back to that 6-year-old little girl, and I thought, man, she did 44 people. I can do what she did. I can just do it 50 times. And it was a little bit more than that because she was just remembering last names and I'm memorizing first names and rank and last names. But come on, she's 6 years old. You have to be willing to sit there and discipline yourself and say, "Hey, I'm going to work on this. I'm going to do this." This is a great way to practice your discipline, actually. The next thing that will happen in the middle of a project like this is just, at first maybe you have to force it a little bit. You have to force I'm going to study today, I'm going to review today. But somewhere in the process, it starts becoming a habit, and it starts consuming you. And it's all you want to do. I remember back in 2012 when I was memorizing the Afghanistan wall, I would be laying in bed and I would be reviewing and I would just be going through my brain. And I remember one night specifically, I was going through the brain and I was reviewing everybody on my locations in my mind. And I got up to about 1,250. And I just fell asleep. And I remember falling asleep instantly, sleeping for 8 hours and opening my eyes. And then I picked up 1,250 251. And it just consumed me. When I would be driving down the road and I would see a license plate and it would say 689, I would think, oh, what's 689 on the wall? It begins to consume you. And you know what I learned also in this process of doing big memory projects like this is I kept it a secret. I did this naturally and instinctively at the beginning. In 2009, when I was training for the USA Memory Championship, I didn't keep it a secret on purpose. I just don't normally talk about my job with people. And I consider competing in memory tournaments my job. You know, if you're talking to a plumber, do you really want the plumber to tell you, this is how you fix toilets? You know, it's his job. So in that same sense, I didn't talk about my job a lot, which was competing in memory tournaments in 2009. The week before the tournament, I had been training for 90 days. I'd hired a United States Navy SEAL to help me. It had consumed me. And I just realized, oh, I need to tell my mom I'm going to New York. So I said, hey, Mom, I just want to let you know I'm going to New York to compete in the memory tournament. It had consumed me. The 90, 100 days before the tournament. Even more than that, a year before the tournament, I was just all about it. I had my attention so focused on the tournament, it didn't even think across my mind to tell people. And that ended up playing to my advantage because I won in 2009 and 10 and I set some records and I became the national champion. If I had gone on Facebook and said, hey, I'm training for the memory tournament, I think I'm going to go win, everybody would have congratulated me before I competed, saying, you can do it, you go. And in a sense, you're getting some of the congratulations before you complete the project. So that's going to lessen your desire to complete the project. In 2011, I got a little bit cocky and I told everybody that I was memorizing all the victims of September 11th. Well, it backfired on me. I started telling everybody about it. I started talking about it. And then when that project didn't happen, everybody kept asking me, how did this go? And I was so embarrassed I had to say, I didn't do it. So when I memorized the Constitution and when I memorized everybody who died in the war in Afghanistan, I just kept it to myself. And I think that's important a little bit. Tell somebody that's a coach, tell a friend, tell maybe your family if they can help you or your friends if you want, but don't go around making big announcements. I'm working on this project. I'm going to memorize this because you want the reward to be after it's done. You don't need to get the reward prematurely. Another thing that really became real to me when I was memorizing the Afghanistan was do it for yourself. Don't do it for anybody else. And I was doing it to honor the fallen, but I wasn't doing it for the attention of others. And I think that's really important. Find something that is so interesting to you that you do it for you. And that's what I did. I did it for me. Now, when I eventually wrote it out, the response was overwhelming. And it kept me going. Another thing that I didn't really think about before I had started the project, let's say that you can memorize 10 words a day. And you can memorize more than that, but let's just say you can do 10. Well, if you could do 10 a day, then how many words could you memorize in 20 days? 200. Easy. 20 times 10 is 200. Yes, if you can do 10 a day, then in 20 days, you'll have 200. But you are not accounting for the review. And that is such a big part of a massive memory project. I would memorize maybe 40 or 50 names in a day. And then the next day, before I memorized the next group of names, I would review the first set of names. And that's so crucial. Well, guess what happens on the third day? On the third day, before you add and you memorize another 50 names, you've got to review 100 names. The review process is actually where you're going to spend most of your time. I would spend days and sometimes an entire week just reviewing. Imagine after I had memorized the Constitution and I had memorized the first 3,000 words of the Constitution, before I add the next 100 words, I'm reviewing those 3,000 words. So the review process is something that you're not going to account for because we don't think about it. We think, well, if I can do 10 a day, then in 20 days, I'll do 200. True and not true. You have to review. And that's a big lesson that I learned. Another thing that I really found was memorizing in the mornings was so helpful to me because that's when your brain is, you just woke up, your brain is fresh. So I would try to get most of my memory work done before 11 a.m. Because if I tried to do my memory work in the evening, my brain was exhausted from the day. So I really found a time of day that my brain was operating at the peak, and that was in the morning for me. You know, another thing that I think you would find in the middle of a big project like this is that it's relaxing to you. I mean, think about it. At night, you know, some people count sheep to fall asleep. What if you could close your eyes and just remember an entire chapter of the Bible as you're falling asleep, or an entire, like I did, the Constitution? There is something relaxing about it. There's a little bit of meditation aspect to it. You know, I'm gonna say something else here. Unless there's a deadline, like you gotta have this memorized by May 19th. Unless there's a deadline, an important principle to remember is it doesn't matter how slow you go as long as you don't stop. And what that means is that some days you're going to memorize more than you do other days. Some days your brain's going to be working fast and some days it's not. But just don't give up. And that goes back to the aspect of discipline. You have to be disciplined. And I guess the last thing, you know, or I guess one of the last things that I noticed was if I was just sitting at my desk and memorizing, I would get distracted. If I definitely laid down in bed, that was never successful for me, because I would either get too comfortable and fall asleep, or I just couldn't get comfortable laying down with a book just at the right angle. Where I found most of my success was I used the Mind Palace method, where I use a map of a city to memorize often. So I would just go walk that map of the city, and it really served two purposes. I would lose weight, I would get in shape, but I would also, it was just engaging my brain, and I would use the insides of stores and restaurants and coffee shops and walking in there and walking around those and just seeing all the action. So actually just walking through my Mind Palaces really helped me. I'm proud of it. I'm proud of the massive memory projects that I've done, not just because of the scope of the information that I memorized, but because of what they mean to me. And that again goes back picking something that's important to you.